If you own ColecoVision, you already own a powerful state-of-the-art computer. Arcade controls, like Turbo, the Roller Controller, and new Super Action Sports. You'll plug in Atom, the revolutionary ColecoVision family computer module with new Super Games keyboard and printer. ColecoVision, the only system you'll ever need.
Hey folks, Crazyclimber80 here again, and this time we're going to look at my tribute to the ColecoVision home system. And this was a second generation gaming system released in August of 1982 by Coleco Industries Incorporated, and it was discontinued in 1985. There were 130 some games or thereabouts, but we're going to look at some details about it in just a sec here. The ColecoVision sold for $175 at the time, which wasn't really outrageous. You can see it has two controllers in the back, and we'll look at the controllers in depth a little bit later, but they were plugged into the system, which was kind of cool, and they had telephone cords like the Intellivision controllers, and they were almost as bad. You see the game slot, it's got kind of a silver plating that buckles when you push the cartridge in, and it has an on-off switch to the left of it and a reset button to the right of it. And at the front is a little space for an expansion module to plug in, and we'll look at the expansion modules in just a moment. And there's the ColecoVision controller. Like the Intellivision, it has a 12-button keypad, except this has star and pound, where clear and enter were on the Intellivision. But instead of an awful disc, it has a little knob that you move like a joystick, and two side action buttons. Like the Intellivision, the ColecoVision had game-specific overlays for the controllers. Well, let's look at some other controllers for the ColecoVision. This is the very cool roller controller. This came with the Centipede knockoff Slither, and it has a trackball up at the top, a very responsive trackball, very cool, and it has four action buttons in red below it, and between them there is a switch that goes between the regular controllers and the roller controller. And you see that it comes with two regular ColecoVision controllers. Very, very, very cool setup. Now here is a controller that is not cool. This is the convoluted, complicated Super Action controller. This came with the game Super Action Baseball in 1983. Incredibly complex and unnecessary. You have a joystick at the top that you can control, and this is meant to be held in your hand and controlled with the other hand. And it has a 12-button keypad and a little thumb dial called a speed roller at the bottom. And then where you grip the controller, there are four triggers: a yellow, red, purple, and blue trigger. Just a total frickin' mess. And you control the joystick on the top. There were 7 games that made full use of this controller, but I guess all games for the ColecoVision can reportedly work with this completely convoluted and unnecessary controller. Some specs before we look at the expansion modules. It had a Zilog Z80 computer, 16 kilobytes of video RAM and 8 kilobytes of ROM, up to 32 kilobytes of storage. It had a TMS 9928A graphics video display controller created by Texas Instruments, had an SN76489 sound chip, and the pack-in game was Donkey Kong. Well, this is expansion module 1, and this actually played Atari 2600 games. It had ports at the front for Atari joysticks. It had a little cartridge slot, and you see the cartridge in there, and a bunch of switches that did like probably selected difficulty or power or reset, etc. Interesting story behind this. Atari sued Coleco for patent infringement over this, and they lost. Coleco used off-the-shelf components to basically build their own Atari 2600, since it wasn't existing parts from an existing 2600 or whatever. I guess that Coleco won. But they settled out of court, and they created the Coleco Gemini, which played only Atari 2600 games. Well, this is expansion module 2, and this is actually just a steering wheel controller. It came with the game Turbo in 1982. To the right of the steering wheel is a gas pedal with an on-off switch on it. This came with 7 games, or was compatible with 7 games. And this is expansion module 3. This converts the ColecoVision to the Atom, which was a home computer by Coleco. This was originally going to be called the Super Game Module. It was going to be something different, but it was canceled and replaced with the Atom. Speaking of which, this is the Coleco Atom, released in October of 1983 and discontinued in early 1985. It did not last long. Colossal failure. Cost $725. It had a Zilog 780A computer, 80 kilobytes of RAM, a tape drive that was 256 kilobytes, a printer, and 3 Motorola processors. It had a Texas Instruments TMS 9928A graphics and Texas Instruments SN76489AN sound. There were numerous delays and malfunctions, especially with the printer. It just had constant problems, which led to its early demise. There was no basic programming, but it instead had built-in typewriter, word processor, smart writer. The printer supplied the power to the Atom system. There was no monitor. And you see that there's a tape drive at the front of the module at the top left, and to the right of that is the printer, and then below is the keyboard, and it has a couple controllers. Now note that some cartridges said for the ColecoVision and the Atom, and some cartridges just said for the ColecoVision. But the cartridge, or the games for the Coleco Atom specifically, came on cassettes. And there's a Buck Rogers Planet of Zoom, or whatever it was called. Well, this is a copy of the ColecoVision. It was called Dina, and this was released in 1986 by Bit Corporations and Telegames. It played both ColecoVision and Sega SG-1000 games. And notice that it has an NES-styled controller, and that it doesn't have a numeric keypad on the controller, but it has one single numeric keypad on the console itself. There are a lot of games that did not work with this. The roller controller and the Super Action controller did not work with this. nor did any of the expansion modules. If you turn on the ColecoVision without putting a cartridge in first, then you get this screen. I found it interesting that you got a screen at all. Well, in retrospect, the ColecoVision was really quite cool for its time. It had the best arcade conversions of any system. I didn't have one of my own. I played one, I think, when my folks briefly had one, and it was pretty impressive. Some of the character movements and scrolling were kind of choppy, but other than that, the arcade conversions were pretty awesome if you could get past that. So it was a pretty good system for its time. It unfortunately only lasted a few years. In terms of sales among the second generation consoles, the Atari 2600 sold 25 million units, and the ColecoVision was a distant second with at least 6 million units. Third was the Intellivsion with 3 million units, and then tied for fourth was the Odyssey 2 and the Sega SG-1000 with 2 million units. And such a shame about the Coleco Atom, such a potentially powerful system, but just problems after problems, and there were so many delays. Just a shame that it just barely lasted more than a year. Well, I thank you very much for watching my tribute to the ColecoVision system, created by Coleco Industries Incorporated in 1982 and lasted till 1985. Well, one of these days, I hope you'll join me for my 20 from the ColecoVision series. That'll be one of these days. I might have a few side projects until then. Well, thank you for watching. Hope you stay safe, and I will catch you later. Bye, folks.
Your vision is our vision. ColecoVision.